What is something illegal you have done and got away without getting caught? I stole my own car from the tow impound lot. Best part was getting the certified letter months later that they were going to auction it if I didn't come and pay for it. I went into CVS for 3 things: deodorant, the specific pencils I like to use, and a notebook. I grabbed the deodorant, perused the office supply aisle and saw they didn't have the pencils I wanted, so I decided it wasn't worth it to get the notebook either. Feeling like my trip was a failure, I left. Walked out of CVS with the deodorant in my hand. No alarm went off, no employees stopped me. About 3 steps outside of the door, I realized I just stole, however unintentionally. So I walked back in, bought the deodorant and 3 other items out of guilt. The summer after I graduated high school, my best friend and I bought season passes to Six Flags and decided to go every day because it was only an hour plus away. A week or 2 into our summer, Six Flags introduced their fast passes. We immediately bought them, jumped the line and were hooked. This was going to be the best summer of our lives, but the fast passes were like $20 each, which adds up if you're going every day. Luckily for us, the stupid idiots printed them on business cards and punched out a hole when you rode. So we just printed our own at home on my friend's dad's super nice printer and rode the crap out of every ride we could. We started making friends with the ride operators, and they'd start telling us what color the ink would be the next week so we could stay ahead of the law, and the suckers in line. After 2 months or so, they started printing them on plastic, but I worked at a plastic factory that used plastic sheeting that was the same thickness, and we were still able to print them if I cut the sheets down to size. We got to ride the rest of the summer out in style, but the next year they introduced the Tamagotchi-looking fast passes, and I knew that I'd been beaten. It was the best summer of my life, and it was really thrilling to feel like I was getting away with something that was technically illegal, but also was a completely victimless crime. Broke into a church, made a mess. Went into the kitchen, made myself a sandwich, snacks, grabbed a soda. Went on my merry way back home. Woke up the next day. Sober me felt guilty. Went back to apologize and pay for any damage. Ended up with a felony. I jerked off at a friend's house. Edit, this isn't illegal as such, but I thought it would be funny to share. This happened a few days ago and I'm debating whether to tell him. Assisted in semi-stealing a car. Almost 2 decades ago my cousin calls my dad and says his car broke down. As my dad has friends with heavy equipment, he figured my dad could get a trailer to tow it on. So my dad, my uncle and I go pick up a flatbed tow truck from a friend of his, then drive 2 hours to pick up the car. We find it near where it should be on the side of the highway, so we load it up and go to a rest stop to secure it on the truck better. As my dad and my uncle are attaching straps, I'm looking at the car and notice something is odd. My cousin's car, late 80s Audi, had broken speakers for whatever reason. They all stopped work, so instead of replacing them with normal speakers, he used house tower speakers, big ones at that back seat and passenger seat. I'm noticing there aren't any tower speakers in the car. I pointed this out and they stop and start looking at the car, then checked the plate number. They don't match. Cousin had a vanity plate. My dad immediately hooks the call, raises the bed and lets it roll off into a space at the rest area. We hop into the truck and drive off to find the car. We find it less than a mile away. Audi reliability jokes aside, what are the odds of 2 identical Audis, same year, color and even rims and tires, being broken down that close to each other? Watching porn under 18. I stole a police radio from a tobacco officer once, drunk as hell and underage at a club. I was on the dance floor at some club and the elderly lady asked if I wanted to dance. I was like, frick yeah, cougar action. She then asked me to follow her and I was like, frick yeah, this lady fricks. She then showed me her badge and I was like, frick. Officer took me to the back office of the club and threatened to take me to jail and decided on just giving me a fine. When she went to make a copy of my ID, she left her radio on the desk. I shoved that crap in my pants. I have no fricking clue why I did this. Went outside and called my friends and told them we have to leave. Got in the car and showed them what my drunk self did, and we all had a great laugh. Never paid the ticket and never received a warrant, so I guess I got away with it. When I was in college, I ran a free, illegal bar for my friends out of my dorm room using alcohol that I stole. I had a whole system worked out for stealing the booze from this big grocery store chain, and the entire time none of the employees suspected a thing. I made friends with a bunch of them, and they would always say hi to me and chat whenever I would go, which was about 2 to 3 times a week. I actually did get caught for the stealing, but not at that grocery store, only when I tried to do it at Target back home in Chicago. I got arrested for that and felt really stupid for what I was doing, so I gave up shoplifting. However, I never got in trouble for my bar, and I had a lot of fun mixing drinks for my friends. Also made my room the spot to hang out before going to hit the parties later on. I might have a few pence from work in my drawer at home. This is not an admission of wrongdoing, nor can I attest to how they got there, if they're even there. I used to have a total lead foot. One day, I was driving to my ex-wife's parents' house by myself. They lived in a small town right off of the freeway. Now, on the freeway I was driving about 80 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour, which was standard for most drivers. When you pull off the freeway, it immediately drops to 25 miles per hour, 45 kilometers per hour. So, I pull onto this main drag and start driving through the town. I'm about a mile down when suddenly I notice a police car pull up behind me. I look down and see that I'm driving at 45 miles per hour, 70 kilometers per hour. A few things hit all at once. First, I couldn't afford a ticket. I was 20 miles over. I would have ended up with a $200 plus ticket just because I failed to decelerate. I was only 3 blocks from my in-laws, and the officer hadn't turned on his lights yet. For reasons only known to me, I immediately pulled over, turned off the car and started walking. The officer pulled up behind me, not knowing what to do, but still with no lights turned on. I just kept walking without turning around. I get to my in-laws and tell them what happened. They tell me that I have to go back for my car, so I do. The officer was gone. No consequences whatsoever, never received a ticket in the mail, never heard a thing. I would never, ever do it again. And that's how I got out of a major speeding violation. My friends and I didn't pay for our dinner at Steak and Shake this past weekend. I stood waiting at the register trying to pay for 20 minutes, but no one came to take my money. It was 12:30 a.m. before we left. For about a year in college I consistently stole half gallons of chocolate milk from a supermarket. Walked in, grabbed the milk, walked out. Never got stopped, never got any trouble. It's probably the only thing that kept me going through college. When I was around 12 there was this Pokemon magazine that had Pokemon cards attached to them in a supermarket. So I grabbed the magazine, but I really wanted those cards and didn't want to buy the magazine. So while I was reading I slowly ripped off the Pokemon cards to make no sound at all. I still feel guilty about it 8 years later. I brought 2 or 3 Cuban cigars back to the US from Montreal once. When we cleared the border I turned to my parents and used my favorite line from Futurama. Guess what your accessories to? I once kept a dead otter in my freezer after finding it on the side of the road. In the UK this can get a hefty fine and prison time without a license. Once I found out, I released the dead otter into the wild. It was a bit like Free Willy but with less movement. When I was a teenager, my Labrador got out of the yard and I finally found him at the pound with a bullet in his shoulder. I had to put him down. I inadvertently found out who did it. I spray painted his Corvette. After he got it repainted, I did it again. Editing for clarity. This was a small town in the late 70s, I did tell the cops when he was shot but we didn't know by who, they said they could do nothing. As far as I remember, even when I found out who did it they said they couldn't help me. I found out who did it because my sister went to a party and a guy there was talking about a dog he shot. He lived in the same block where animal control picked my injured dog up. Of course I took my dog to the vet, but as a poor 16-year-old, I did not have the funds needed for surgery. If I recall correctly, it was $400, which would have been a small fortune for me. I had the vet put him down. He was a sweet lab. I bawled my eyes out for weeks. One of the local cops was a family friend. He put 2 and 2 together, and after the second paint job, he stopped by my work and mentioned what happened to this guy's car, and looked at me and said he hoped it wouldn't happen again. I took the hint and left him alone after that. This all happened over 40 years ago, but to the best of my recollection, that is what happened. Okay dudes and dudettes, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe. Remember to drink enough water and stay in school. Okay, bye.